Hi and welcome. It's Jennifer Britton, the host of the Teams 365 blog and Effective Virtual Conversations. As you can hear, I have a bit of a froggy voice today. Not sure if we're going to be able to do this call too well, but I wanted to just take you through this month's Effective Virtual Conversations call around boosting virtual retention and making it stick. One of the greatest challenges today in virtual programs is the ability to ensure that it does get retained. We're competing against a death by conference call. We're having group members moving from session to session. So really today I wanted to look at what are some techniques for helping people retain information in the virtual space. This is certainly an area of key importance, not only for our group members, but also for the notion of innovation and creativity. As Steve Jobs wrote, creativity is just connecting things. And part of what we want to do is create an opportunity for people to connect in to their knowledge as well as connect in with others' knowledge. In a digital space, it's a key consideration. What do we remember? What can we connect? If we're not retaining things in the same way we do as when we write, what really is the imprint in our learning and our memory? So I went back to some of my own psychological training, and in many moons ago in the late 80s, early 90s, I did a number of courses as part of my undergraduate work in science, in psychology at McGill. And I was reminded of Ebbinghaus, who really did initial research on what we retain and what we remember. And so Ebbinghaus has created this thing called the forgetting curve. And really, as you can see here, as comes from Wikipedia, as time progresses, as days progress, we remember even less. And so we can boost that. As you can see, really, if we're not using something, not retaining something, within 6 days, it's gone. And so there are some things that he found really made a difference. The meaningfulness of the information, the way it's represented, as well as some physiological actors or factors, stress, sleep, etc. What came across as I was looking for sort of more recent research, because Ebbinghaus was in the 1950s, I came across the work of Todd Maddox, who has a PhD, and he writes, "The brain is hardwired to forget. Retention is a true goal of training." We really want to do this in a virtual event. So I thought it would be interesting to see, what really do we retain? And for years we've been saying the written word is retained much better. So where does that come from? And that really came from a study by Mueller and Oppenheimer in 2014 called "The Pen is Mightier Than the Keyboard." What they did is they studied differences in university students, the difference between taking notes by hand or doing it by computer. And they did a couple of things. One of them, they had people listen to TED Talks, and they found that those that wrote by hand did better. So one of their outcomes was that it is suggestive evidence that longhand notes may have superior external storage as well as superior encoding functions. So basically that you can remember it more, that it's encoded, it's put in the brain, it's encoded in the brain, and that it's stored in a different space. So what they continue on by saying is there are two hypotheses as to why note-taking is beneficial in the first place. The first idea is this encoding hypothesis, which says that when a person is taking note, the processing that occurs will enhance their learning and retention. Then there's this external storage that, when you take notes by hand, you can look back at your notes and think about how that is. It's a physical something that we can look back into. In notebooks, I can pick up my notebook, I can look at it, I can do a scatter, which is very different than if I'm going into my notebook on the computer. Will I see things like this that actually jog my memory? So in terms of that 2014 study, what they found was really in listening, we tend to capture notes verbatim, word by word, rather than reframing it in our own language. And so there is this notion that when we hear things, we're typing it verbatim, versus when we're writing it, we're hearing it, we're encoding it, and we're also making it our own. We're putting it in our own language. And I think this example of what I just flashed at you is probably a very good one, where you probably saw some graphics in my writing. And in fact, this was part of a business planning session. So notice that I've got different graphics here. I've put things into buckets. If I had that on a computer, it might not look so graphically oriented. At the end of that session, I wanted us to look at the 5 W's and an H, the who, what, why, when, where, and how. And that really is quite interesting. So, again, this is an area that's quite new. I think it is important, though, to be thinking about as a educator, as a facilitator, as a coach, as a trainer, how do we help people retain things? This is also especially important when we're working within the virtual domain as a leader. How are people retaining things? Are you encouraging people to take notes as you go, by hand, on paper? When things go into the computer, of course, we know they can get lost. So in the remainder of this call, and again, I apologize for my voice, we'll see if I re-record it, but for now, wanted to get this out. I think the key thing is, how do we help people remember? How do we help them connect? And as learning professionals, as leaders, there are a couple of things that we can really do to help this process. Number one, going back to Ebbinghaus's retention curve. So notice how it arcs down, that we remember things sort of in the initial day, and then it actually definitely dramatically drops off. There's some practical things that we can do to help boost that. And the number one approach, I think, is a do it now. And this is something I see in my work as a leader, as a business owner, as a professional leading retreats, where people who are able to do things now, get it checked off, really retain that. We go through the learning process. Even if it's just a 15-minute, 1-hour block, it starts to build some muscle, whether that's cognitive muscle or whether that's physical muscle. Doing things now creates its own momentum. So think about how you could get people to do things now. I've spent a lot of time this winter of 2019 talking about the importance of a pause, of silence, and part of that is getting people to identify what they're going to do next. Rather than saying, what are you going to do before we meet again? Perhaps it's a reframe of, what are you going to do in the next 24 hours? How are you going to put this in practice? Especially if you're holding your meetings on a Friday. Do people really remember what you talked about on Friday on a Monday? Chances are probably not. So we want to do it now. Make sure that we give space and time to do it, perhaps live during the call, and at very least having them walk away with a specific action step where not only they've identified what actions they'll take, but also how are they scheduling it in? Is there time on the calendar the next week? And on running this call on a Monday morning, I think this is a great example. I think back to a call and a series of communications I had Friday afternoon. Until I got into it, I had forgotten about it. But by the by, I had made a note, check out this in my calendar, and that was really the prompt. So do it now. We had done some things, but I needed to do it now today, and thankfully had built in time into the schedule. Think about how you can boost, do it now. If you'd like, pause the recording, write it down, and also put it into an upcoming meeting or learning event. Number two is about moving beyond the just shock and talk. So we've used that term for many, many decades. When we're talking and we're getting people, we're just lecturing. I think breakouts are certainly an underutilized approach on a lot of different virtual channels. As many of you know, I've been sort of a Zoom stalwart for the last 5 years. I think 2013, 2014, I started using this platform. And what I've been really excited about is getting people into smaller group breakouts. So similar to this photo here, getting people into that smaller room where they can talk, where they can reframe, and where they can truly, as per this cognitive psychology language, encode their learning. We really do want to give people an opportunity to support their retention of learning, and that may mean reframing things, re-specifying it, putting it in their own language, engaging with others. And while we may not sit around the same computer, in these breakout rooms, people can share their screen, people can annotate, people can mark up on the screen. So this is something where really you'll want to think about, how do you create opportunities for people to talk about what they're learning, to put it in their own language, to start utilizing it as well. Number three is actually scheduling a follow-up call. So to having Ebbinghaus's retention curve, and you'll notice that after about 5 or 6 days, there's nothing there. Could you schedule a follow-up call? Whether that call is in the first 5 days or whether it's 2 weeks out, would a follow-up call create some new energy and momentum for people to pick up their information, review it, think about their action plan that they've created in the workshop so that they can actually put it into action. And this is one of the reasons why I got into coaching in the first place. I used to run a lot of retreats globally in my former world of work. I would literally be flown into countries, run a retreat, and I would leave after a few days. When I'd run into people or call them a few months later, I'd say, how's it going? And I typically have the same response. Jen, that was great. And, we're busy. And so we do want to create, if we're going to invest in this, we do want to create an opportunity to have a spotlight not only in the moment, but as a follow-up. And so in a lot of my work in the last 15 years, I've scheduled in follow-up calls, 1 hour in length, maybe 3 weeks after, or 2 weeks after, or even a month and a half after our work together. These are another signal or another impetus to get people thinking about and into action after the fact. A fourth sticky factor, and I've sort of referred to this along the way, is making sure that we do give time and space for people to identify their next steps, that we might even get them to map it out, not only put it on a list, but would it be useful to have this visual anchor? I was hosting a call on Friday, and we were talking about program design, how were learning professionals going to be designing their own programs. A lot of ideas, and we were talking about metaphor. And I said to one of the group members, I said, would it be useful for you to actually draw out on your whiteboard a roadmap? And for her, that was like, bing. So for her, her next steps became very much a map it out and, moving a very heavy cognitive conceptual idea into discrete steps where each one of those touch points, each one of those modules became a different part with anchoring themes. So think about how you could ensure, of course, people have a next steps, but also map it out and perhaps have a fun visual that's on their whiteboard or something they can print out or draw out in their own notebook. And I'll see if I have an example, because I usually use this in some of my programming to actually help them anchor their next steps going forward. So I don't, but if you look at some of my virtual business planning, that's what we do. We actually take a pen and start mapping it out. Really key to keeping things moving and keeping things in our flow of identity. All right, so with that, couple of ideas. We've done 1, 2, 3, and 4, a quick review, next steps on a map, follow-up call, talk about it using breakouts, annotations, smaller groups, and also do it now. Excuse me. So number 5, reinforce with application. And in this one, we are literally giving them an opportunity to get it done. With a number of my programs, I offer an afternoon get it done day. And these 4-hour blocks have become really, really popular in that it's an application opportunity. Once again, we leave planning, we leave business planning with opportunities for long lists, but we don't always get it done. And so in this reinforcement opportunity, maybe you have an afternoon where you bring together a group, check in every hour, every half hour to see how things are going. We reinforce with application. Finally, and number 6 is to pass it on. There is nothing that can replace the act and the art of learning. And so in this opportunity, we might get our learning group members to work with each other to pass something on, to reframe what they're hearing, what they're learning, and passing it on to their team, to others even in the group. And this can also help to boost that sticky factor of retention. Ultimately, we want to avoid the death by conference call where it's just coming in one ear and going out another, where it's just one idea and flowing forward. So really think about the things that you can be doing, whether you're using these 6 strategies or not. I'd like to invite you to keep the conversation going with us in Better Voice. And I've set up in the last few months a Conversation Sparker Zone. This is a virtual portal. It's really a library. It's a place where you can connect, come together on topics related to virtual conversations, virtual remote teams, business building, personal productivity, virtual professional issues, and group and team coaching issues. And those are things that I think are of interest to all of us. So definitely check it out. You can email me for the exact link, but you'll find it over at conversation-sparker.mn.co. And as I said, if you get an error message there, let me know. I can send you the actual link to sign in, and you can access this portal. There's many of us there. We're talking about things. We're raising questions. We're doing polls. I'd love to hear from you what's key and top of mind. One of the tools that I think is important are two tools that I wanted to remind you of to track your steps. At the back of Effective Virtual Conversations, there is the action plan tracker. And if you have a copy of my latest resources, Coaching Business Builder and PlanDoTrack, check out the monthly daily trackers. These are a great way to actually see the sticky factor. So a final way, number 7 really, is to actually get people to list their steps. And like the monthly daily tracker, to track it out. As you can see on a monthly basis, this person was tracking several incidences. Exercise, notice how well they did there. Writing, notice that. Networking, notice that. So I've included a sample legend, as you see here, in both PlanDoTrack and the Coaching Business Builder, and it's yet another way to track your steps. So lots of upcoming programs, including Virtual Facilitation Essentials. That will start next Monday when I have better voice. You can definitely check out our monthly planning hacks, as well as the new on-demand 19 tips for productivity, which you'll find over at teams365.teachable.com. I'm Jennifer Britton. Thank you for joining me, and thank you for working through this with me. Let us know how you're going to retain your sticky factor in your virtual work. Out of sight does not need to mean out of mind. Think about incorporating these 6 different factors in your upcoming work. And with that, we're back again next month. Do refer to the schedule, and I'll look forward to being your host then. Take care.